This stage of life, after the decades of responsibility, the careers, the marriages, the heartbreaks, the quiet mornings, the long nights, there comes a moment when a man wonders something simple yet profound. Is there still a way to reach a woman's heart, to make her think of me, not out of obligation, but out of desire? And the truth is, yes, but it has nothing to do with youth or charm or bravado. It has everything to do with something far more subtle, far more powerful, and far more accessible to a man who has lived long enough to understand what truly matters: presence, intention, and emotional intelligence. You see, women at this stage of life are not impressed by noise, they are moved by nuance. They don't want grand gestures, they want to feel understood. They don't want you to chase them, they want to feel chosen in a way that is gentle, steady, and unmistakably sincere. And that is why today matters. Because what I'm about to share with you is not a trick, not a game, and certainly not a line. It is a doorway, one that leads into a woman's emotional world, one that invites her to remember you long after the conversation ends, one that stirs something inside her she hasn't felt in years, and perhaps something you haven't felt in years either. These are the three magic keywords that make a woman think about you non-stop. Not because you forced anything, not because you pretended to be younger than you are, but because you offered her something rare, a feeling she can't get anywhere else. And here's the part most men your age never hear. Your experience is your advantage. Your calmness is your attraction. Your maturity is your gift. Your steadiness is your power. You don't need to compete with the younger men. You stand in a different category entirely. A woman in her 40 seconds, 50 seconds, 60 seconds, or even 70 seconds is not looking for a boy. She is looking for a man who knows himself, who knows life, and who knows how to make her feel safe, seen, and subtly desired. So stay with me, because once you understand these three simple words and the psychology behind them, you will never communicate with a woman the same way again. You will speak in a way that reaches beneath her defenses, beneath her routine, beneath the surface conversation, and touches the place where her longing lives. And when you speak to that place, she'll think of you when she wakes up. She'll think of you when she checks her phone. She'll think of you in the quiet moments when she least expects it. She'll think of you because something in her will whisper, I want more of that. I want more of him. So breathe, settle in, and let me take you through it slowly, clearly, and with the respect you deserve. Let us begin. When I talk about the power of subtle emotional invitation, I'm speaking to something that most men, especially men in their 60s and beyond, have felt but rarely named. You've lived long enough to understand that real connection is never created through pressure, performance, or trying to impress. It comes from a quiet, confident presence, a way of speaking that makes a woman feel there is space for her. Not space to be perfect, not space to please, just space to be. And at this stage of life, that is more attractive than anything else. A woman doesn't think about you non-stop because you overwhelm her. She thinks about you because you awaken something gentle inside her that she wasn't expecting. And that awakening begins with three simple words that come from the first key point. The words that offer her a feeling, not a demand. Imagine this moment. You're talking to a woman you admire. Maybe she's someone you've known for years. Maybe she's someone you just met at a gathering or through friends or even by chance. The conversation is pleasant, polite, predictable, and then you say something that stops her. Not because it's loud, but because it's real, something that touches her. Not because it's clever, but because it carries intention. At your age, you understand intention better than anyone. You've learned that the tone behind a phrase matters more than the phrase itself. You've learned that silence can speak louder than words. You've learned that emotional presence, even when quiet, creates a gravity that draws people in. So when you offer her a feeling, when you acknowledge something in her inner world, you disrupt the routine of her day. You make her pause. You make her notice. Women crave that moment of being noticed, not for how they look, not for what they do for others, but for who they are underneath all that life has placed on their shoulders. When you say something that touches that deeper place, it is like opening a window in a room she didn't realize had become stuffy. Suddenly, she breathes differently. She feels something shift. But here's the subtlety. The power of this first point is not about complimenting her. It's not about flattering her. It's about giving her an experience of emotional recognition. Because the truth is, while many men your age think women want excitement, what they actually crave is resonance. They want to feel that the man standing in front of them understands the nuances of emotion, not just the surface-level gestures. You may have noticed this in your own life. There were times when you spoke very few words, and yet the person across from you felt calm, grounded, held. That is emotional invitation. It's an atmosphere you create. It's the tone in your voice. It's the softness in your expression when she shares something real. It's the way you don't interrupt, don't fix, don't judge, because by now you've learned that presence is stronger, T. Hand persuasion. At 65 plus, you are not trying to prove yourself. You already know who you are. And that confidence, quiet, mature, steady, is irresistible to a woman who has lived long enough to recognize the difference between noise and depth. When you speak from that place, even one simple sentence can linger in her mind for hours. It can replay in her thoughts, not because you try to make it memorable, but because it touched a place she doesn't show to many. The first set of magic words, the ones tied to this key point, always begin with acknowledging her inner world. You might not know her fully yet, but you offer her a doorway. You let her know that you see something in her that most people overlook. Maybe you notice the calmness she carries. Maybe you sense the strength behind her gentleness. Maybe you see a spark in her eyes that tells a story. But the key is that you name the feeling, not the surface detail. When you do this, she feels safe enough to let you in without you asking for access. She feels understood without you demanding anything from her. She feels valued without you trying to impress. And this feeling, this sense of being met emotionally, is what makes her think about you long after the conversation is over. Women remember men who make them feel seen. They remember men who offer a sense of calm curiosity. They remember men who speak with intention rather than urgency. And men at your age have a natural advantage here because your depth isn't something you're performing, it's something you've earned. You've lived through love that worked and love that didn't. You've experienced connection that grew and connection that faded. You've held joy, loss, longing, and acceptance. When you speak from that place, not heavy with sorrow but rich with understanding, you create a resonance she can't ignore. There's something else here too, the power of slow. Ing down. A younger man rushes. He tries to convince, to chase, to impress. But a mature man knows that real attraction grows in silence just as much as in speech. When you invite her into an emotional space with subtlety, you give her time to feel. You give her time to reflect. You give her time to want more of you. This wanting is what makes her think about you non-stop. She begins to wonder what you meant. She replays your tone. She thinks about the steadiness in your presence. She feels a warmth when she remembers the moment your attention rested on her, not the kind that consumes, but the kind that comforts, and that comfort becomes addictive, not because it weakens her, but because it strengthens her. When a woman feels emotionally safe with a man, especially later in life, she doesn't forget it, she cherishes it, she seeks it, she allows herself to hope, and in that quiet hope, you become the man she thinks about when she's washing dishes, when she's lying in bed at night, when she's taking a walk, when she checks her phone to see if you've reached out. It all begins with a subtle invitation, a moment where you create space for her to feel. That space becomes a connection, that connection becomes intrigue, that intrigue becomes desire, and that desire becomes the thoughts she cannot shake. That is the power of the first magic words. They awaken her quietly, deeply, and in a way she didn't expect at this stage of life. And that is where everything begins. There is a reason curiosity has always been one of the most subtle yet powerful forces of attraction, especially between a mature man and a woman who has lived long enough to recognize when interest is genuine and when it is merely decorative. And at your age, 65 and beyond, you carry a kind of curiosity that younger men can't imitate because yours is not born of hunger or restlessness or a need to conquer. It comes from experience. It comes from a lifetime of learning that people are far more than what they show, far more than their roles, their titles, their age, their appearance. When you show curiosity about a woman's inner life, you are telling her that her essence, not just her exterior, is worth knowing. Women rarely encounter that kind of curiosity, especially later in life. They are used to being admired for moments but not explored with intention. They are used to being spoken to but not asked the kind of questions that allow them to reveal the parts of themselves they thought had gone unnoticed. When you activate that curiosity, you shift the dynamic entirely. You make her feel like a mystery again, not a burden, not a responsibility, not a routine, but a woman with depth, with dreams, with stories that still matter. This is where the second set of magic keywords live. They revolve around inviting her to share something just a little deeper than the surface, but without pushing, without interrogating, without crossing boundaries. You create an opening, soft, warm, respectful, that tells her, I'm listening, I'm interested, I want to understand you. And that feeling is intoxicating for a woman, not because she needs validation, but because emotional curiosity is rare, and rarity creates magnetism. Think about it this way. Most men ask questions that stay on the surface. How was your day? What do you do? Where are you from? But a man with maturity asks differently. He listens for a hint of emotion, for a pause in her voice, for the way she hesitates before answering something lightly. And instead of moving on, he gently follows the thread. Not to pry, not to dig, but to let her know that he heard something meaningful. That is the difference between routine interest and magnetic curiosity. Maybe she mentions that she enjoys gardening because it gives her peace. A why? Angerman might nod and move on, but you might say, what is it about it that brings you that sense of quiet? And suddenly she's not talking about flowers, she's talking about her soul. She's talking about how life has changed. She's talking about the moments she seeks calm because she has carried too much stress for too long. And in that moment, she is not thinking about chores or errands. She's thinking about how effortlessly you created a space for her to express something she doesn't often share. That is the kind of moment a woman replays later. This curiosity does something else too. It makes her feel chosen, not for her beauty, not for her body, not for her age or youth, but for her inner landscape. You are showing her that the woman she is beneath the surface, the woman shaped by years, by experiences, by challenges, by joys, is worth discovering. And when she feels chosen in that way, she begins to think differently about you. She begins to lean in. She begins to wonder what you see in her that others have overlooked. And here's the beautiful thing. At 65 plus, your curiosity carries gravity. You are not trying to figure out who you are. You're not trying to prove anything. You're not trying to impress with lines or tactics. Your curiosity comes from a place of calm confidence. And that makes it incredibly compelling. Women sense when a man's interest is sincere or when it's simply a strategy. They can feel the difference in your tone, in your patience, in the way you listen. When your curiosity is real, they relax, they open, they trust. And trust is what makes her think about you long after the conversation ends. She will remember the way you asked the question nobody else took the time to ask. She will remember how your eyes softened when she shared something vulnerable. She will remember the way you didn't rush to fill the silence, but allowed her word to settle. She will remember how with just a few words you made her feel like a woman whose inner world still matters, and she will start to anticipate the next moment you give her that feeling again. The second key point also carries another truth. When you show curiosity about her inner life, you awaken her own curiosity about yours. She begins to wonder what shaped you, what experiences taught you to listen this way, what kind of life you've lived, what you feel, what you desire. Suddenly, she is not just answering your questions, she's imagining your story. She's picturing the man behind the calm voice, the man who notices without judging, the man whose interest is tender rather than demanding. That imagining is powerful. It is the beginning of emotional chemistry, the kind that builds slowly, richly, deeply, the kind that can happen at 40, 60, 80. Because attraction does not age. What ages is superficiality, not desire. And when you ignite a deeper part of a woman through your curiosity, she associates you with emotional nourishment, with safety, with a kind of connection she didn't know she could still experience. There is a moment every woman feels when a man genuinely wants to know her. Not what she looks like, not what she can offer, not what role she plays, but who she is inside. When she feels that, her guard softens, her voice changes, her eyes warm, something inside her wakes up, and whether she is 40 or 75, that awakening is electric. Curiosity does not demand anything from her. It doesn't corner her. It doesn't trap her. It simply invites her. And invitations are far more seductive than demands. Women think about invitations, they linger on them, they replay them, they imagine what it would feel like to continue exploring that emotional space with you. They wonder what will unfold the next time you speak, the next time you ask, the next time you list. In that attentive, steady way only a man with maturity can offer. And that wondering becomes desire. This is why the second magic keywords are so powerful. They show her that you see her not just as a woman, but as a world. And when you make a woman feel like a world, she will think about you long after the conversation is over. That is how curiosity becomes connection, and connection becomes longing. There is something profoundly magnetic about a man who carries quiet confidence, especially a man who has lived long enough to understand that strength doesn't need to shout, and desire doesn't need to chase. At 65 or beyond, you have earned a kind of steadiness that younger men simply cannot imitate, no matter how hard they try. And women feel this steadiness immediately. They feel it in your posture, in your tone, in the space you create when you speak. They feel it in the way you don't rush, don't force, don't demand. This is the kind of presence that makes a woman breathe easier without even realizing why. And it is this ease, this emotional safety that makes her think about you long after the conversation ends. Emotional safety is not about solving her problems or protecting her from the world. It's about giving her a moment of rest, a moment where she can simply be herself without pressure. Most women walk through their days carrying far more than they admit. Responsibilities, disappointments, uncertainties, unspoken fears, unprocessed emotions, memories of past relationships that left marks they still carry quietly. The world often asks them to be strong, to be patient, to be understanding, to be giving. But very few people give them a place where they can let that weight slip off for even a few minutes. When you embody quiet confidence, you become that place, not by trying to fix her, not by trying to impress her, not by dominating the conversation or showing off. Wisdom. You become that place simply by being fully present, emotionally steady, grounded in yourself. A woman feels safe when she senses that your calm is real, not a mask, not a performance, but something you've built over years of living, reflecting, failing, healing, and rising again. This kind of steadiness feels like a harbor. It tells her without words that she can relax her shoulders, that she doesn't have to be perfect in your presence, that her emotions are not a burden, that she won't be judged for her humanity. And this experience is so rare, so precious, that once she feels it, she holds on to the memory of it. It becomes something she returns to in her mind, like a warm room she wants to step into again. Quiet confidence also has a second effect. It communicates that you are not afraid of intimacy, not the physical kind, but the emotional kind. You are comfortable with silence. You are comfortable with sincerity. You don't need to fill every moment with jokes or charm. You don't need to rush her into anything or convince her of anything. You let the connection unfold naturally. And that natural unfolding is incredibly attractive. Women think about men who make them feel safe enough to open up, but not pressured to reveal anything before they're ready. They think about men who don't treat vulnerability as weakness. They think about men who listen not to respond, but to understand. And at your age, you carry the life experience to do exactly this. Not because you learned it from books or advice videos, but because life itself taught you the value of patience and presence. Quiet confidence also means you don't need her to validate you. You don't need her to choose you to feel worthy. You don't need her attention to feel alive. And ironically, that independence is what makes her drawn to you. When a man is emotionally self-contained, a woman feels like she can approach him without being consumed. There is no clinginess, no desperation, no hidden agenda. She senses that you want her, but you don't need her to feel an emptiness inside you. That balance of desire and independence is irresistible at any age, but especially in later years when both people want companionship without losing themselves. Women also respond strongly to consistency. A man with quiet confidence doesn't say grand things he can't follow through on. He doesn't make promises for the sake of sounding charming. He doesn't show interest intensely one moment and pull away the next. His presence is steady. His tone is stable. His intentions are clear. And this consistency becomes its own kind of allure. A woman begins to trust the rhythm of your presence. And trust is the foundation of attraction that lasts. When she feels safe with you, something important happens. She begins to reveal parts of herself she normally hides from the world, not because you ask for them, but because she feels she can. She tells you stories she hasn't told in years. She shares memories she hasn't revisited in a long time. She speaks about her joys, her regrets, her hopes, her disappointments. And when she sees that you don't judge her, don't interrupt her, don't rush her, she forms an emotional bond with you that feels both comforting and exciting. And this excitement is not loud or intense. It is soft, steady, surprising. She starts to think about how she felt while talking to you. She thinks about the tone of your voice, the calmness in your eyes, the patience you showed, the way you held space for her emotions without flinching. She thinks about the way you didn't try to dominate or control the moment, but instead allowed her to unfold at her own pace. This memory becomes a quiet whisper in her mind, reminding her that she felt something rare, something she wants to feel again. There is something deeply compelling about a man who is unshakable, not because he is hardened, but because he has softened in the right ways. You are not trying to be invincible. You are simply rooted in your values, in your patience, in your maturity, in your clarity. And this rootedness is what gives her the freedom to open without fear. This quiet confidence also makes your words land differently. When you speak, she listens, not because you speak loudly, but because your words carry weight. They come from a place of lived experience, not theory. And when you offer the third magic keywords, the ones that communicate presence, stability, and emotional grounding, she feels them in a way she cannot ignore.